Sage.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Thank
Tēnā
you.
koe.
Very pleased to be speaking in the third reading of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Bill. The Green Party supported the bill when it was introduced, but then withdrew that support at Select Committee in response to the public submissions and our understanding there of the way in which the bill failed to provide enough local leadership to Christchurch and the extensive ministerial powers. So I'm very pleased with the work that the Minister has engaged in subsequent to Select Committee with opposition parties and with the Christchurch City Council to deliver a much better bill. Because, Mr Speaker, it's in the next phase of post-quake recovery that in Ōtautahi Christchurch we've got a real chance to build a sustainable, creative and people-centred city. We can create a city that is so much more than just a reconstruction of buildings, of infrastructure and transport links. We can create in Ōtautahi Christchurch a city that could lead New Zealand in the way that residents live, work and play and the way in which visitors enjoy the city. We want a vibrant, livable city, one that attracts visitors, investment, culture and that is really lively. And so the anchor projects have been a source of frustration. We want to see some of that money that is proposed to be spent on the stadium, for example, not being spent on a potential white elephant, but in creating a much more livable city. And it's been disappointing that the City Council has had to slow the work that it's been doing on building new cycleways because of the financial constraints that it has, in part because of the reluctance by the government to renegotiate the cost-sharing agreement. But, Mr Speaker, this is a day to celebrate the changes that have been made in this piece of legislation and the changes in the framework for Ōtautahi Christchurch going forward and the new governance structure there, because it is providing the basis for ensuring that we live in a beautiful city, one which weaves its past, the central role of Ngāi Tahu, into the present and future, which recognises the many diverse cultures that now call the city home, that celebrates its wonderful position in a stunning natural landscape on a floodplain created by the Waimakariri River, sheltered by the Port Hills, threaded by the Otakaro, Avon and Opuaho Heathcote rivers, and beside an estuary which hosts so many different bird species. It is a beautiful location, but some of the last 5 years has felt quite oppressive in Christchurch. And one of the pieces in this bill that I really welcome is Schedule 6, with its long list of legislative instruments which the bill is revoking. Now, some of those emergency orders were obviously necessary, but others which overrode due process under the Resource Management Act and other legislation reduced the ability of citizens in Christchurch to have a say on major decisions influencing their and the city's future. So this bill is in part giving the city back to the people of Christchurch so that we can have much more influence on the major decisions about the city's future. And I, like others, would like to acknowledge the work of the Christchurch City Council and the Mayor, the Honourable Leanne Dalziel, because I think if opposition parties hadn't been working alongside the Council and saying to Government and the Minister, we need to make changes in this bill, I don't think we would have been successful. So the Christchurch City Council has had a crucial role in highlighting the need to restore local leadership in Christchurch, to the City Council, to Regenerate Christchurch and to the other councils, Selwyn, Waimakariri and Ekan and of course Ngāi Tahu. So now we are providing the legal framework, the governance structure, but much will now depend on how Regenerate Christchurch and how the City Council in particular use the opportunities that this bill provides to involve the community in strategic decisions and planning for the future of the residential red zone, the central city and areas like New Brighton. And there are certainly provisions through the regeneration planning process. There's quite a lot of flexibility there to engage in different sorts of consultation, and that is something we would encourage Regenerate Christchurch to do. We note, as the Minister did, that some significant powers still remain in Clause 42 to override existing Resource Management Act plans and policies, regional land transport plans and council bylaws. The Minister has called these powers a backstop, and we, and I'm sure the community, will be watching quite closely as to how those are exercised. Because if they are done wisely and in a circumscribed way, that may well be fine. But we don't want them to compromise the opportunity for much more public engagement through the Regeneration Plan process. And we have seen through Share an Idea an outpouring of creative and thoughtful ideas from Christchurch citizens about their vision for an accessible, a green and sustainable city. And it has been the community that has sustained that vibrancy and that feeling through projects by Gap Filler, by Greening the Rubble. It's these sort of community collaborative gravel-led projects which have put Christchurch on the map internationally. The Pallet Pavilion, the Lux Festival, the Mosaic Chair and the Greening the Rubble sites around the city. It's been those projects which have helped give us hope post-quake rather than the big anchor projects led by government. And one of the areas of the bill that I think we should all celebrate is the fact that the definition of regeneration includes improving community wellbeing, and it also provides for resilience. Now, that's a much talked about phrase these days, but making Christchurch a more resilient city must involve planning for climate adaptation, planning for sea level rise. That must be a central part of the regeneration planning. And it must ensure that we have commercial residential buildings, infrastructure development, taking better account of sea level rise, better account of more extreme weather events. And we heard in Select Committee this morning from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Christchurch has more homes on low-lying areas that are at risk from sea level rise, some 10,000 homes, than either Auckland or Wellington. Now, the City Council, looking to the future, tried to introduce some planning provisions that sought to control development in areas of potential coastal hazard. The government and the council withdrew those in the light of the response from property owners. Mr. Speaker, it is too hard to leave it to local councils to have to deal with how to respond to sea level rise on their own. There needs to be more national leadership here, and this is a role where central government has to work in partnership with local councils and not just leave it to the council. So we were very pleased to hear the Minister's comments in the committee stages about allowing the former coastal wetland at Bexley, which was reclaimed and built on against the advice of the Department of Conservation, that he was reasonably supportive of that returning to its natural state. Because areas like that Bexley wetland, the sand dunes along the coast, the margins of the estuary are really important in providing resilience, in giving the city a buffer against intense storm events, against more flooding, giving it the flexibility about where to locate stop banks along the rivers, and ensuring that there are areas where the water can go in those intense storm events. So we have to ensure that that's part of the regeneration plan for the residential red zone. And as Poto Williams has said, EvoSpace and others have already done a lot of public consultation to surface a lot of community ideas about what should happen in the residential red zone. In the Green Party, we are committed to the Avon Otakaro Park becoming a reality. We think that should connect the city with the sea, the city with the eastern suburbs, and would strengthen Christchurch's identity as a beautiful, creative and enjoyable city for residents and visitors. And it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do this with the land in the residential red zone. It needs the future plans for that area need to acknowledge the residents who live there and have had to leave homes in the area and have those demolished. It needs to provide not just for formal sports facilities, but also for a lot of informal community gardens, restore the Mahinga Kai sites, recognise Waihi Tapu, and look at some detailed feasibility studies on projects like the Eden project example. We also need in the regeneration a much greater commitment to sustainability principles being implemented in new buildings so that they are more energy efficient, they make much greater use of wood and that they are more friendly to be in. There's a great opportunity to use wood in the rebuild. We haven't seen that. But, Mr Speaker, I'm pleased that the Green Party can now support this bill and acknowledge the work of the Minister and the Christchurch City Council and other opposition parties in achieving good changes to the bill.